The views and opinions expressed during Love and Life with Lana and Dave are those only of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of our podcast hosts or affiliates. Any content provided is not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, anyone, or anything. All right, let's do it.
You're listening to Love and Life with Lana and Dave, the podcast where logic is power and you take control. Thank you for tuning in and making the choice to listen in and get ideas for your own love and life. Now, here are your hosts, Lana Williams and David Vaccaro.
Hey, what's going on? This is Lana. We're in April at this point. I'm going to do a quick little bit on imposter syndrome. Some people know this, some people don't. I'm going to go over it real quick. Just because some of us suffer from this, where we live our lives and do what we normally do, and we climb in our corporate careers or for some of us, our DJ careers or whatever it is that we do and we've been doing for years, 30, 40 years, whatever it is, but still feel like at some point somebody's going to find us out. They're going to think we don't belong where we are, or that, it's just a really weird syndrome that some of us face. And so if this is something that you go through, I just wanted to kind of quickly go over it. And I'm not really sure that there's really a cure for it per se, but this is more of I'm with you, I feel you, I understand how you feel about this. And this might be something that you go through and you don't really understand that you're not the only one that does. You might think you're the only one that does this, and you might think you're going crazy, but you're not. So imposter syndrome, again, it makes you feel like despite all of your expertise, despite all of your degrees and experience and accolades from people around you that know you know your job, it's also it's like this nagging self-doubt. There are many reasons that it happens. A lot of us are self-conscious, or we come from a specific background. We may just always use negative talk on ourselves, or, within our brains, we may have done that. And that kind of stuff, it metastasizes eventually, and it kind of becomes, it's a common thought process. As long as we continue to talk negatively to ourselves, it becomes a habit. And in the back, where we're not even noticing it anymore, in the background, it kind of runs like a feed, or on a loop, like a drone of, hey, you can do better, that kind of thing. Now, I was out playing tennis one time and realized that I actually will talk to myself when I'm playing tennis, and I will talk to myself like probably one of the worst tennis coaches you've ever heard. I have never actually had a tennis coach. And maybe if I did, my tennis coach would be really horrible to me. But the tennis coach in my head is absolutely merciless and, extremely terrible and insulting and everything else. So it happens all the time. Why did you hit that? You should know better. You should have run faster. What the hell is going on with you? That kind of stuff. This is the stuff that goes on in my head. Also, I do suffer from, imposter syndrome. So again, look it up. Look up everything you can about it if this is something that you think you resonate with and that it is something that you suffer from. I mean, again, it does have a name. Some people out there are going through hell with this and don't realize that it's got a name. It's an actual syndrome. So basically, there's a bunch of different types of personality traits that lend themselves or are adjacent to imposter syndrome. If you're a perfectionist, right? One of the first ones I'll name, have you ever been told that you're a micromanager? Do you have a hard time giving other people tasks? If you're on a job or even around the house or, with your partner or your kids or your family members or friends, do you have a hard time handing somebody over something to do, right? Do you think they're not going to do it right? Or do you think you're going to lose control of that thing and it's not going to get done correctly? And I know all of us to some degree kind of do that, but how extreme is it for you, right? Do you get upset with people that don't do things the way you want them to, but also are stressed because you're the one that has to do those things, right? When you don't completely do something correct, when there's a little bit of doubt as to whether you did 100% good job on something, do you berate yourself for like days, weeks, months, saying, saying to yourself that you know that you're not supposed to be doing it because you may have missed the mark on something once or once a month, maybe you may not completely get everything right. You hit like 95%. That kind of stuff is perfectionism, right? And that isn't something that you would, as a perfectionist, a lot of us are that way. It starts really young. I think it's an overcompensation trait. It's something where you're trying to laser focus on something and be better at it in order to overcome some other shortcoming that you think you have, right? Then there's another one where it's like let's say like it's really called the Superwoman or the Superman, right? Do you work really late? Do you work late to the point where it's ridiculous? You know what I mean? Trying to make sure that you're keeping up with everything. Maybe you have a job where you have so much to do that you have to work a little more than other people to keep up, or you want to review a lot of your stuff and make sure that it's done correctly, or you don't want to walk in the morning and have a pile of work. So you do as much as you can the night before. But is it to the point where you're like living at your job? Do you have a hard time like actually becoming sedentary? Can you not relax? Do you have a problem just sitting and doing nothing? Do you have things that you want to do in your life that like you want to have fun doing, but like you never get to because you're too busy working, thinking about work, strategizing about your work, and almost feel like you're not, how do I want to put this? You're not deserving of any kind of playtime. So if you want to, let's say, go skiing, or you want to take a weekend away and just do a bed and breakfast, or, you just at some point feel like, one, you're going to lose control of what you're trying to do at your job or your home or anything where you feel like you have like all the control and everything's lined up. But also you don't feel like you made enough of an effort or you made enough of a dent in your work, like to deserve the thing that you're trying to go relax and do. And then also, the same kind of thing of, I can't really relax. Like, I can't wait to get home and relax. And then when you get home, you're like, hey, your brain starts spinning about what's going on the next day. What did you do during the day? Reviewing all of your stuff. And so you don't really ever relax. You just kind of like on to the next thing in your head. Right. So, and do you have a title achievement? Do you have a plaque on your wall? Do you have a title on your desk that you feel like you didn't earn? Like it's not something that you actually feel like, for whatever reason, even though you went through the motions of, you went to school, you did the jobs, you did the internships and all that kind of stuff. But when you get to a certain place, you just still feel like you didn't earn it correctly. You feel like somebody gave it to you, or you feel like you somehow, even though you did the work and you were there, your brain tries to fool you into thinking that you took the shortcut or that you didn't really earn what you're telling people that you are. That's that, right? And then if you're somebody who's just a naturally smart person, right? And that's a very subjective phrase, right? So, but let's say that you went to school and most of the stuff that you did in school came pretty easy to you. You didn't really have to work very hard at it. It would be called the natural genius syndrome. So do you have do you have a situation where you don't really have to work too hard at what you're doing, especially when you were in school as a kid, straight A student, wanting to make sure that you got those like extra, extraneous or extrinsic gifts or stars, gold stars, or, prizes or plaques or things that people were telling you that you were getting for good effort. And because you were getting 95s and 100s on all your tests. Were you always told that you were the smart one? Were you referred to that way, that as a kid, whether it be in school or at home or anything like that? And do you not like the idea of having a mentorship or somebody that's telling you, or, and again, there's several things that happen that lead to imposter syndrome, but this is kind of like, if somebody comes along and wants to mentor you, you actually kind of refuse it, or you kind of avoid it, or you don't really like the idea of somebody being in a position to teach you something because you think you can handle yourself. Now, that may be just an isolation thing. That may be an independent thing, a fiercely independent thing. Sometimes that's a trauma response. Sometimes it isn't, right? Do you have a really bad confidence problem over just like a setback that you're trying to accomplish a project or hit a goal and you have a setback, which with some projects and some jobs, it's almost like built in to the curriculum or to the process is that the setback's going to happen and you almost have to prepare for it, but it still throws you for a really big loop and makes you feel it personally affects you, where you think it's your character that is being compromised over it, or it's going to be gauge of your actual character as a person, or your personality, or who you are, your worth, your self-worth. And if you're not, this is something I suffer from. If you don't learn something and master it like the first time you do it, do you avoid it? Or do you get upset or frustrated because there's a learning curve that you have to go through? And you want to be an expert and you want to be great at everything. So you want the first time you step up to the plate to do anything, you want to be like an ace at it. And if you're not an ace at it, there's a lot of self-reflection and frustration and stuff that you go through because you think you're supposed to learn everything one time and master it. And that's something that, I definitely suffer from. And then something called the soloist, where I actually suffer from this quite a bit, where it's like, I can do whatever, I can do everything myself. I really hate asking other people for help. It sounds like, it's good to be, and I really can't speak on this objectively, but it's good to be self-sufficient, right? And it's good to have a handle on things, and it's good to be really resourceful for yourself, right? So that you can really handle most stuff on your own, but it's not a requirement, and it shouldn't be like a complete disaster to actually ask somebody else to help you with something here and there, right? I do have a problem with that. And that comes from my childhood and my playbook. And if you don't know what a playbook is, go back and listen to some episodes at the beginning of our podcast, because a playbook is, how you were raised. Where did you get your personality from, your attitude from, and how you gauge your self-worth and everybody around you? That really comes a lot from how you were raised and the people around you and what you learned from them, right? And then how you took what you learned. So, do you see yourself as a project that you're doing? In other words, you're at work, you're doing a project. Do you see that project as you? Do you identify personally with it? Is it something you can't separate yourself from, right? So there's no problem with asking for help from people, but if you are dealing with this type of a syndrome, you are having a problem with it to the extreme. It really, really bothers you to reach out to anybody and ask for help. And as you get older, you start to realize that it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world to ask. The problem comes sometimes with people that don't actually want to be honest with you when you ask. That's frustrating. I'd rather have somebody say to me straight out, no. I don't have a problem with being told no. I'm all about respect about when somebody talking to me about how they really feel or what they really want to do. I totally want them to be straightforward with me about that. It's not going to upset me if they don't want to do something. It's not going to bother me or affect the friendship or anything like that, or whoever it is I'm talking to. But they will have hangups about saying no to me directly. And that's something, unfortunately, I can't do anything about it. I can only tell somebody 15 times to tell me straight out that they can't help or they don't want to help or whatever it is. But I can't make them, not be polite to me and just give me the straight skinny, because of course that's their playbook. That's how they were raised. They were raised to be nice, and some people are raised to say yes to you. And not have any intention of doing it. And of course, that's one of the most frustrating things of all. So, and in the end, there's an expert aspect of personality, which means how much you know, what you know, that's how you base your competence. That's how you gauge your own confidence, right? Knowing that you're never going to know enough to be, an expert, to know everything there is to know. And it's a very strange thing, but I personally have a fear or an overwhelming sense of knowing how much information is out there and knowing I'm never going to live long enough to know it all is really frustrating to me. It probably makes no sense to anybody else listening to hear that. But it's kind of like, oh, wow, like if I could have 5 lifetimes, that'd be great, because then I could really like dig into a lot of information. Like there's so much out there, and there's so much of vast information. Sometimes looking at it all overwhelms me, and it makes me just not want to do anything because I don't know where to start. Of course, I start wherever I can. I just, I don't have any choice but to get pulled into rabbit holes, and that's my life. So I can never completely avoid information. It's like, there's no way. I'm too much of a nerd for that. And I will end up in a rabbit hole by accident a lot. So it's not something that I have any choice over. But there are things that you think that you should know so much about that it makes you, obviously you feel dwarfed by the fact that there's so much information on something that you like or you have interest in or you're learning to work with, that it can make you feel like you don't know anything. It can make you feel incompetent. And that's not really true. Not applying for jobs because you don't meet every single requirement that's educational. I mean, that's, there's been previous podcasts on that. And there's also been articles written about that there are certain people that will not, if they don't have every single teeny tiny requirement on a resume, they won't apply. And then there's also people that will fudge about 2/3 of their resume based on the job description and just wing it. And so, I mean, this is life, right? It takes all kinds, and there's a lot of personalities out there that do it differently. So to me, it's appalling that somebody would walk into an interview and only know 1/3 of what needs to be known to do the job and just say, yeah, I'm good, and just wing 2/3 of it and like hope they can learn it or hope nobody ever calls them out on it. That to me is like horrifying, but there are people who do that. When somebody says you're an expert, do you feel like you're being mocked? Do you feel like that's not really you? Does it upset you? Does it make you feel weird to hear that? Obviously, and the word expert is pretty literal. And so maybe you feel like in order to be an expert, you'd have to know everything there is to know infinitum, right? But none of us can do that. So to you, nobody could really be an expert on something, but maybe to someone else, you're an expert to them and where they sit as far as what you know or what they need to know that you can provide, whatever, that's subjective as well. I do know, I personally haven't done this, but I've wanted to. And it's just been because of my life and the way that things go that I haven't been able to really fully attack this, but are you constantly looking for training, certifications, degrees, all of those things in order to, one, improve, but also because you think you need to improve because I have this theory with some people that you're only as good as like the last thing you accomplished, right? And that comes from being a DJ, right? You're only as good as the last song you sang. You sang. You're only good as the last song you played. And a customer will come up and say, hey, can you play this song? And you play it and they're like, oh, you're great. And after about 3 minutes after that, you're complete. You're like nothing to them again because you maybe don't want to play the next song. So it's a give an inch kind of thing in a way. And not all customers are that way, but some are that way. They're like happy you did something for them, but it really fades quick. And you go back to ground zero really fast and they come right back with another request. And so it starts to feel like you're shoveling shit against the tide with some customers because, they're not happy all over again about a song that you say you won't play, where you said you would play the last one and you did. And that was great. And it's kind of like, yeah, that song made sense, or that dance floor was okay with that song, or, hey, it was a slow night. That song made more sense, but now I can't do that. You'll all of a sudden you'll turn into a completely different person to them because you won't do the next thing. So I call that you're only as good as the last song you played, right? So these are the things that cause, or these are the things that, like, if you have these traits in your personality, you're more susceptible to imposter syndrome. You know, you're somebody that's going to be more apt to torture yourself, to think that you don't belong where you are. The only thing that I can say is, in that case, you know, you would want to, in this podcast is all about logic, right? So you would want to take the logical route, look at what you've accomplished. Sometimes you really need to sit, and I know that it's nice to be in the moment in your life, but sometimes you really need to sit and kind of review your life and say, you know, I remember going through all the steps and all the process of getting to where I am today. You know, I remember when I didn't have this job. I remember when I was in a different field or whatever it is. I remember when I went to school for this and got my degree for this, and, you know, the internships I did. And sometimes you really need to sit and take stock of, like, your own history. A lot of that should, you know, quelch it. You know, obviously sometimes we don't have time to sit and look at, like, the last 30 years of our lives. We're somewhere where we don't have the time for that. But I would say that when you're not, you know, in a position where you have a very limited amount of time, that's a good place to be, to, you know, say, you don't necessarily have to celebrate it. You don't have to, you know, shout it from the rooftops. You don't have to bake yourself a cake over it. But, you know, as much as you want to be in a place in the next 5 or 10 years and you're not there yet, so maybe you feel like you're not adequate enough because you haven't reached that, it is good to kind of milestone yourself and look back and say, well, what have I done? Let me look at what I've done. You know, this stuff kind of, and believe me, I'm one of the worst people for this. I don't do it. Yeah, so what? I did that. So what? And my friends will sit down and tell me, well, yeah, sure, you did that. That's a big deal. You know, the stuff that you do, this particular thing you did, this is a big deal. And, you know, you did this and you did that. And to me, once I accomplish something and I'm, like, out of it about, you know, half a year, it's like, not that it doesn't matter, but, like, the stuff that I do, it fades on me really quick. You know, like, I don't celebrate my accomplishments for very long. I never did. I've always been way too focused on the next thing, I guess. And so it's nice that I hit that, but then I've got to now work to get this next thing. And so, yeah, I could sit around and, you know, I feel like a slacker, I guess I'm maybe, to just sit around and celebrate the thing I did last year. But I have this stuff on my bucket list, and here's the next thing that comes up on the list. And so I need to focus on that, you know? So anyway, imposter syndrome, look it up. Addressing a few things. I know I wasn't around in March. March was kind of a busy month. It's a little crazy. It is kind of, we're getting into the spring and that kind of thing. And I did want to do a podcast last week, but, like, like I said, there's just been a bunch of stuff going on, and I've been trying to, like, settle into the house, and I just moved and some stuff like that. So I will be lining up guests. I'm working on that because nobody wants to listen to just me for, I don't know, however many minutes. So I am going to get all that together. I do have some stuff that I want to podcast on this month, so you will be hearing podcasts from me on a weekly basis. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Right now, we're going to be into almost the middle of April, so we're going to have some decent weather, some stuff that just happened. The eclipse just happened. The Baltimore Bridge just happened. Let's see what else is happening in the news. There's as far as, like, you know, world events, we're in the Northeast, so we had a blizzard, which typically would be snow, but because of the time of year it was, a lot of us got rain, but it was a lot of rain. We've had, March was, like, one of the most intense levels of rain that we've had for a while. So into a new month, hopefully we won't have as much rain this month, but it did seem like we were getting rain almost every day in March. But, you know, all of this is small talk, which I don't really like very much, but it's a relatable stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it in. But again, looking to bug Dave, get him in on some podcasts coming up, and some guests that I want to bring in. And again, a couple of topics I want to talk about that I know I have on the list. So we will go from there. www.lanaanddave.com. That's the website. That's where all our platforms are. That's where all of our social media is. So you go there, check it out. You can get to just about every streaming platform and all of our social media from there. You have our 800 number and our email address. So just send us whatever, you want. Give us a 5-star review, download and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye. Hey, you just listened to Love and Life with Lana and Dave. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share the podcast, leave us a comment or review, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. We'll see you soon.